silence, and listen. There are moments when the heavens are said to open. Not in storms, not in fire, but in quiet passages between worlds. Long before sacred temples were built, before prophets spoke in visions of thunder, one man crossed into those opened heavens. And what he saw there was never meant for human eyes. His name was Enoch. Unlike every other figure of his time, Enoch did not merely live beneath the sky. He entered it. The ancient records speak carefully about him, as if even the words themselves were afraid to reveal too much. They tell us that he walked with God. And then, without warning, they tell us that he was no longer here. For God took him. No death is recorded. No burial is described. No grave is remembered. Only a disappearance that breaks every pattern of human history. But beneath that silence lies a forbidden journey. A passage through heavenly regions. A crossing through worlds no one was meant to see. If you feel drawn to what was hidden beyond the sky, if you believe there are truths ancient eyes were never meant to witness, you can subscribe and continue this journey with me. Before the flood erased the memory of the first world, humanity lived closer to its origin. The distance between the mortal and the divine had not yet hardened into myth. Names passed from breath to breath like quiet echoes of creation. Each generation standing only a few steps from the beginning of all things. 7 generations after Adam, among those early bloodlines, one name appeared that would never fade like the others. Enoch. The ancient account gives us only fragments about his life. It does not describe his appearance. It does not tell us his thoughts. It only tells us what happened at the end. It says that Enoch walked with God. And then it says something that no other human story dares to say. It says that Enoch was not. For God took him. Those words would be unsettling on their own. But when placed among countless records of death, they become terrifying. Because disappearance is not death. And being taken is not the same as perishing. Something else happened to Enoch. Something hidden between the lines. Tonight, we begin to open what was sealed. Tonight, we follow the path of the man who entered the heavenly worlds. To understand what Enoch saw, we must first understand what the ancient world believed about the structure of reality. They did not imagine a single sky above their heads. They believed in layered heavens, stacked like hidden chambers beyond human sight. The higher one ascended, the further the world of dust and breath was left behind. Each level was said to be brighter, more dangerous, and more sacred than the one below. According to the forbidden traditions, Enoch did not rise into heaven in a single instant. He was guided, led step by step through gates that no living man had ever crossed. The first realm he entered was still close to the world of men. The light there was gentle. The air still carried the shadow of the earth below. But as he was drawn higher, the familiar faded. The sky no longer behaved like a sky. Space itself began to feel alive. Enoch wrote that he passed through doors formed from fire and crystal. Doors that opened without sound. Doors that separated worlds from worlds. Beyond those gates, the heavens were not empty. They were filled with beings older than humanity. Watchers. Guardians. Keepers of cosmic boundaries. These were not gentle figures with wings of comfort. They were vast, luminous, terrifying in their beauty. Some stood over the paths of the stars. Some over the winds and the storms. Some over the secret movements of the earth itself. And Enoch, a man born of dust, walked among them without being destroyed. That alone is a mystery that defies the limits of human thought. As he ascended, the worlds grew stranger. The light burned brighter. The silence grew deeper, and the sense of time itself began to unravel. In one realm, he saw rivers of fire that flowed without consuming what they touched. In another, he saw storehouses where snow, rain, and storms were kept as if in waiting. These were not metaphors to him. They were places, and he was walking through them. But among all the wonders he witnessed, there was one truth that disturbed him more than any vision of fire or light. Not all the beings who watched the earth from above had remained faithful to their highest purpose. Among the watchers, there were those who abandoned their station, those who looked down upon the world of men and desired what was never given to them. They crossed a boundary that was not theirs to cross. They descended. And in that descent, the balance of the early world was shattered. Enoch was shown the place of their fall, a region where light and shadow twisted together in uneasy silence, a region that did not belong fully to heaven or to earth. There, he learned that what happens above is never without consequence below. The corruption of the watchers bled into the world of men, and humanity was changed by it. Enoch was shown visions of ancient violence, not only among humans, but among beings far older than humanity itself. He saw how forbidden knowledge passed from the heavens into mortal hands. Knowledge of weapons, knowledge of domination, knowledge of secrets that twisted the course of early civilization. The Watchers taught humanity how to shape tools of war, how to read the stars for power instead of wonder, how to bend nature instead of living within it. What had once been a world close to creation began to drift away from its original harmony. The heavens watched. The earth trembled. And in the midst of this fracture between worlds, Enoch was made a witness, not only to the beauty of the heavens, but to the reason judgment would one day come. He learned that the flood was not only a punishment for human violence. It was also a cleansing of a contamination that had entered from above. The worlds Enoch entered were not only places of light. They were places of consequence. Places where the fate of creation itself was being weighed. Enoch was then led to places where the consequences of rebellion were kept. Regions of confinement. Depths where light could not settle. There he saw the fallen watchers bound. Not destroyed. Not erased, but restrained, awaiting a judgment that had not yet come. They no longer shone as they once did. Their brilliance was dimmed. Their power folded inward like a star collapsing into itself. Some cried out to Enoch, not in rage, not in hatred, but in regret. They asked him to carry a message, a plea, a final request for mercy from the throne they once served. And for a moment, the weight placed upon Enoch became unbearable. He was no longer only a witness. He was becoming a messenger between worlds. The fallen ones asked him to speak for them, to deliver their words into the presence of the Most High. It was a request no human should ever have received, to stand between judgment and rebellion. And yet, Enoch did not turn away. He accepted the burden. For the first time, a man would carry the words of fallen angels back into the highest realm of heaven. Enoch ascended again, this time carrying not only visions, but voices. Words taken from the depths and lifted toward the highest light. The path upward was no longer only a passage through beauty. It was a passage through responsibility. A crossing weighted with destiny. He was led beyond the regions of the Watchers, beyond the storehouses of storm and flame. Beyond the realms where stars were guided along their hidden courses. Here, the heavens changed their character. The light grew unbearable in its purity. The silence grew vast and absolute. Enoch had entered the domain where no rebellion could remain hidden. where every intention was visible, where nothing false could endure. It was here that he was shown how the universe was measured, not only by distance and motion, but by obedience and fracture. He saw the balance of creation as a living thing, suspended between order and collapse. And he understood for the first time why the fall of the Watchers had shaken every layer of reality. When rebellion happens above, its shadow stretches across all worlds below. It was in this place of piercing clarity that Enoch prepared to deliver the words of the fallen, the request for mercy, the plea for a sentence that might yet be softened. But before he could speak, he was shown something that would break the last remnants of his human safety. He was shown the end. Enoch was shown a vision not of a distant age, but of a collapse written into the bones of time. He saw what the world would become if the fracture between heaven and earth was left to spread unchecked. He saw nations rise with the fire of stolen knowledge. He saw violence multiply beyond measure. He saw the earth grow heavy with blood and ambition. And he understood that what began with the fall of the Watchers would not remain in the heavens. It would echo through humanity itself. For the first time, Enoch felt fear. Not fear for his life. Fear for the destiny of the world he had left behind. He saw waters rising. He saw the memory of the earth being washed away. And he understood that judgment was not only punishment. It was containment. In that moment, the forbidden knowledge he was witnessing became unbearable in its weight. It was not power. It was responsibility. After hearing this, it is impossible to remain neutral. Do you believe the knowledge taken from heaven was the root of humanity's fall, or the key to its awakening? Leave your answer in the comments. Only after this vision was complete was Enoch permitted to speak the words of the fallen. Only after he had seen the cost of rebellion in full. He carried the message forward, not as an advocate, but as a witness. He was brought into the highest court of heaven, not a place of walls and thrones as men imagine them, but a presence that folded all realms inward around itself. Here, light was no longer illumination. It was awareness. Nothing could be hidden within it. Enoch felt every thought of his life laid bare. Every moment of doubt. Every trace of fear. Every fragment of wonder. And still, he did not turn away. He delivered the words of the fallen just as they had been given to him. Without addition. Without defense. The plea was heard. But it was not accepted. The judgment spoken was final. The Watchers who had crossed the boundary would not be released. Their sentence would endure until the end of the age. Their offspring, born from union that should never have been, would be erased from the earth. Not to punish creation, but to heal it. And Enoch was commanded to return and speak what he had heard. To warn. To testify. To seal the knowledge that would one day explain the flood. He was no longer only the man who walked with God. He had become the man who carried heaven's verdict back to the world of dust. The descent was not like the ascent. What had once felt like discovery now felt like exile. Enoch passed again through the layered heavens. But now the worlds felt altered. As though the knowledge he carried changed the meaning of everything he saw. The Watchers no longer appeared as distant guardians. They appeared as prisoners of their own choices. Some watched him pass in silence. Some turned away. Some followed him with eyes full of a grief they could no longer name. Enoch carried within him the words that would never release them. And there was no mercy left in those words. As he descended toward the realms closer to the earth, the noise of creation slowly returned. The movement of winds. The breathing of oceans. The turning of the stars resumed their distant rhythm. But the silence he had touched in the highest place never left him. It remained inside him like a sealed chamber. When at last he returned to the threshold of the world of men, he was no longer merely a witness of heaven. He was its warning. And yet, the greatest danger was still ahead. Because knowledge changes those who receive it. What Enoch had seen could not be unseen. What he had heard could not be unheard. When Enoch returned to the realm of men, the earth had not changed. The rivers still flowed. The sky still turned. But he had. The weight of heaven rested behind his eyes. The memory of judgment walked with him in every step. He looked upon humanity and no longer saw only faces. He saw futures. He saw consequences. He saw fractures still invisible to others. The forbidden knowledge he carried was not meant to empower. It was meant to warn. He spoke of watchers and rebellion. He spoke of boundaries crossed and laws broken above the clouds. He spoke of a cleansing that would one day wash the world. But the world of men has always struggled to listen to words that come from beyond it. Many could not hear him. Many would not. Some turned away in fear. Some in mockery. Some in anger. Because forbidden knowledge does not only reveal light, it exposes what was hiding in the dark. And not everyone wants to see what stands behind the veil. Enoch understood then that his return was not a rescue. It was a final attempt. A final mercy offered before the memory of the world would be erased. The days that followed grew darker. Not with storms. Not with fire. But with indifference. Enoch watched as warning after warning dissolved into the noise of daily life. The world continued to celebrate. To conquer. To dominate. The knowledge he carried was too heavy for a civilization addicted to power. Too slow for a world accelerating toward its own edge. The influence of the fallen watchers still moved silently beneath the surface of culture. In ambition. In violence. In the hunger to shape the world without restraint. And Enoch knew that the turning point had already passed. The great reversal was now inevitable. It was then that the presence he had walked with once more drew near. Not in thunder. Not in flame. But in the same quiet authority that had taken him before. The command was not spoken aloud. But Enoch understood it completely. His time among the children of dust was coming to an end. He had walked between worlds. He had carried words between heaven and earth. Now the balance required that he not remain. The world he would leave behind was already marked for cleansing. But he would not walk through the waters. Enoch did not have to be told what was about to happen. The stillness that surrounded the command carried its meaning without words. The presence that had guided him through the heavens now stood at the edge of his final separation from the world. Not as a messenger, but as the threshold itself. The earth beneath his feet felt suddenly distant, as if it no longer fully recognized him as its own. He looked once more upon the faces of men, upon the fields, upon the sky that had once been his ceiling. He knew that he would not walk these paths again. He had become a witness that could not remain among the unprepared. The boundary opened without sound. No wind announced it. No fire marked its edge. Only a quiet widening of reality itself. And Enoch stepped forward. In that moment, the world lost the only man who had seen its fate from above. He did not fall. He did not fade. He was lifted beyond the reach of human endings. The world did not see him leave. There was no gathering, no witness to the moment when heaven claimed him again. To those who remained, it appeared as a disappearance without explanation. One day he walked among them. The next, he was gone. Some said he had wandered into the wilderness and never returned. Others whispered that he had angered the heavens. Most simply forgot. But forgetting a witness does not erase what he carried. The words he spoke lingered in hidden memory. Fragments of his testimony survived in quiet places, in guarded traditions, in forbidden scrolls, and stories passed only to those willing to bear their weight. And over generations, those fragments gathered into what would become known as the Book of Enoch, a record too unsettling to be fully embraced, too revealing to be easily erased. It spoke openly of the Watchers, of rebellion above the clouds, of the mingling of heaven and earth. It spoke of judgment not only as punishment, but as restoration, of destruction not as an ending, but as a necessary severing of what could not remain. And because of this, his writings would always exist at the edge of what the world was willing to accept. Preserved, rejected, hidden, recovered. Long after the flood reshaped the face of the earth, the name of Enoch did not disappear. It drifted through generations like a distant echo from a world that no longer existed. Some spoke of him in fragments, others in riddles, a few in fearful whispers. They said there was once a man who had crossed the heavens and returned, a man who had seen what no one else was allowed to see. And with that idea came a dangerous question. If one man had entered the heavenly worlds, what else might be possible for those who followed? The memory of forbidden knowledge is never truly quiet. It sleeps. It waits. Across centuries, seekers looked upward and felt the same pull, the same unease, the same unbearable curiosity. Some searched for the gates of heaven in sacred geometry, others in mountains, others in dreams. And always, behind their longing, stood the shadow of Enoch, the one who had already gone where they only dared to imagine. But there is a deeper reason his name endured, not because of the journey itself, but because of what his journey revealed about the structure of reality. According to the visions preserved in his name, Enoch did not only see places. He saw structures, patterns beneath existence itself. He was shown that the heavens were not chaos. They were ordered, measured, aligned with laws older than the stars. He saw that light itself followed paths, that time flowed through channels, that even silence had a design. The movements of the sun were not random. The rising of the moon was not chance. The seasons were bound to heavenly circuits invisible to human eyes. Enoch was led to the places where these movements were governed, to chambers where the days were measured, where the lengths of shadows were decided. There, beings stood who did not rule by dominance. They ruled by alignment, by obedience to laws that even they did not create. Enoch understood then that creation was not upheld by force. It was upheld by harmony. And rebellion was not only an act of defiance. It was a distortion of that harmony. This was why the fall of the Watchers had echoed so violently through every realm. They had not only broken a command, they had torn a pattern. When Enoch saw the harmony that upheld the heavens, his understanding of the world below shattered. Nothing on earth was isolated. Nothing moved alone. Every human choice rippled upward. Every celestial fracture rippled downward. He realized that the rebellion of the Watchers had not only altered history, It had altered the inner architecture of the human soul. Desire itself had been bent. Ambition had been sharpened. And the hunger for power had been given a voice that no longer came only from the earth. This was the deeper contamination. Not the tools of war. Not the secrets of the stars. But the distortion of what humanity longed for. Enoch saw that even those who sought the heavens could be driven by corruption they did not recognize. That even wonder could be twisted into possession. The danger was no longer only outside mankind. It had taken root within it. And for the first time, Enoch understood why knowledge itself could be forbidden. Not because it was false, but because it was too powerful for fractured hearts. He had entered the heavenly worlds, but he had also seen the cost of doing so. Among all the visions Enoch received, there were some he was forbidden to speak aloud. Not because they were illusions, but because they were too exact. He saw the paths by which knowledge descends from the heavens into the minds of men. Not all revelation arrives as light. Some arrives as temptation. He learned that forbidden knowledge is not always hidden by walls. Sometimes it is hidden by desire. The watchers who fell did not force their secrets upon humanity. They offered them, and humanity reached upward to take them. This was the first true fracture of consent between heaven and earth. A handshake across a boundary that was never meant to open. Enoch was shown that some doors do not break when opened. They dissolve. And once dissolved, there is no mark left to warn those who step through after. This was why the knowledge was later called forbidden. Not by decree alone, but by consequence. Enoch saw that the most dangerous truths are not the ones that destroy the body. They are the ones that reshape the will. From that moment on, Enoch no longer experienced the world as other men did. Every sound carried a second meaning. Every shadow hinted at a deeper order. The sky was no longer only a roof of blue. It was a layered threshold. A ceiling of hidden movements and unseen witnesses. He walked among people who did not know what stood above them. And silence became his constant companion. There were things he could never fully explain. Not because the words were missing, but because the world was unready to receive them. He saw how easily knowledge could become pride. How quickly wonder could turn into domination. This was the quiet torment of the one who returns from the heavens. To know, and to be unable to fully speak what is known. Enoch carried visions that no language could safely contain. And so he learned restraint. Not all forbidden knowledge is hidden. Some of it is withheld out of mercy. Enoch understood that the flood would erase more than cities and fields. It would erase memory. It would sever entire lines of knowledge from the future. What would remain would be fragments, echoes, faded impressions of a world that once stood closer to the heavens. He saw that humanity after the waters would look upward and feel something missing. A sense of loss with no clear name. They would build towers. They would draw symbols in stone. They would whisper myths of gods and giants. All of it would be an attempt to remember what had been taken from direct sight. And Enoch understood that his own removal from the world was part of that severing. That some bridges between heaven and earth were never meant to remain open. Without his withdrawal, curiosity would become obsession. And obsession would become another rebellion. The world would need distance to survive. After his departure, the world moved forward. But it moved with a fracture hidden beneath its steps. Generations were born who had never heard his voice. Yet they dreamed of ladders to the sky. They dreamed of beings of fire and judgment. Something of Enoch's vision had settled into the human imagination, not as memory, but as instinct. People would look at the stars and feel watched. They would walk into storms and feel judged. They would whisper prayers without knowing to whom they truly spoke. The heavens had closed, but the idea of the heavens had not. And beneath every religion, every myth, every whispered legend of gods and angels, there remained a scar of that ancient opening. Enoch had crossed where no one else could follow. And because of that, the world would always feel slightly unfinished. Even now, long after the age of the flood, the question returns again and again. Why was Enoch taken, and not the others? He was not the strongest. He was not a king. He commanded no armies. But he walked. Not ahead of God. Not behind. With. And perhaps that is the hidden key. That the worlds above do not respond to power as men understand it. They respond to alignment. Enoch did not conquer the heavens. He was received by them. And what he saw there was not given so that humanity might rise above its limits. It was given so that humanity might understand them. The forbidden becomes most dangerous when it is misunderstood as an invitation instead of a warning. This is why his story still unsettles. Because it does not promise escape. It promises accountability. The heavens opened to Enoch. Not so that humanity could follow, but so that humanity could see the cost of trying. In every generation, there are those who feel the same pull Enoch once felt. A longing to lift the veil. A hunger to look behind the sky. They search in numbers. They search in symbols. They search in the stars. Some call it science. Some call it mysticism. Some call it awakening. But the same danger remains. To mistake access for permission. Enoch's journey was not a roadmap. It was a warning written in motion. He was allowed to enter so that others would understand why they must not. The heavens are not sealed by cruelty. They are sealed by necessity. Because to truly see what Enoch saw is to carry weight that reshapes the soul. And not every heart survives that pressure. This is why forbidden knowledge continues to seduce. It promises elevation, but it conceals transformation. Enoch was taken, not because he escaped the world, but because he had seen too clearly what the world would become. He entered the heavenly worlds. He witnessed what no one was meant to see. And when he returned, he carried knowledge that could not remain openly among men. The heavens did not open for humanity as a gift. They opened as a warning. And when that warning had been delivered, the opening was sealed. Enoch did not die like other men, because his story was never meant to end with the grave. It was meant to remain suspended between worlds. If this journey through the opened heavens has awakened something inside you, if it has stirred questions you cannot easily put back to sleep, then you should know this. This was only the outer layer of Enoch's story. The deeper visions, the full structure of the heavens, the watchers in detail, the cosmic laws, and the hidden judgments extend far beyond what we could touch here. If you wish to continue beyond this threshold, the complete journey awaits you in the full-length work. That is where the heavens open even wider. Enoch walked with God. And he was not. Because some journeys are too vast to remain within the world of dust.